One thing we're going to see in 2021 is alongside incremental capacity gains, we're going to see incremental price increases. When supply and demand dictate that price must go up, it absolutely will, especially in the precision scheduled railroading models. As long as intermodal trades at a relative discount to truck, I think the market will accept that. But I think shippers need to brace for the inevitable, and that will mean the movement of goods is going to cost more in 2021 and likely beyond. And that's not just because of supply and demand. There are other external forces like the cost of insurance on the highway side that are going to drive that. And what that may do is drive more freight to rail. And what that might do consequently for longtime users of rail is actually increase their same store price fairly dramatically in 2021. And I do think, though, when you contrast that with the volatility in the trucking market, there will be shippers who are happy to make that trade. And I expect that, we're going to see a little more volatility in the short term. I don't think anyone can accurately predict what demand is going to look like. But I do think that, we're going to see somewhat of a sustainment of what's happening today, which is fairly consistent demand. And I do believe the incoming administration is going to facilitate even more consumer confidence, even if it's just short and midterm. And that will probably provide some stability to the freight economy. And that likely means passing through the costs, unfortunately, to shippers in 2021. What I think we'll see with the new incoming administration is more harmony with trade partners, both allies and otherwise. And that's going to lend itself well to predictability in the international market. Whether or not we achieve a trade balance is sort of besides the point at this juncture. What I think we need to do is focus on repairing those relationships and also ensuring that consumers have confidence and they continue to spend and they'll drive the economy forward when they do. And all of those things, I would say, look positive out of the incoming administration. What we're likely going to see in the medium term is a replenishment of inventory levels, which is going to sustain demand both domestically and globally. When that stops, becomes a moving target. I think what needs to happen for any sort of decline in demand would have to be either consumer driven or market driven or capacity driven. In other words, more capacity coming online to handle what we believe is sustained demand. And I think that it's kind of hard to predict what that's going to look like. I do think what we would suggest most shippers do is be diversified in your routing guide. Make sure that you have multiple modes to rely upon, because when you think about rail and what happened in August with and even late July with unprecedented peak season surcharges, those typically aren't applied to folks who have consistent, repeatable freight with the rails. And what I would encourage everyone to do is look at implementing an intermodal strategy if they don't already have one, because having consistent freight presented to a railroad means that you're protected against the variability to an extent of a capacity crunch. Folks who show up looking for capacity in August of 2021 are going to be treated much the same way they were this year, and that would be unprecedented peak season surcharges, getting into the neighborhood of $5,000 per container. That's not what we expect for 2021, but it's a possibility, and it's one we need to plan for. And I think, when you mitigate risk, which all shippers are vested in doing, one way you can easily do that is by being diversified in your routing guide and ensuring you have multiple mode coverage. I would say that, you want to take that strategy with truck as well. And that's why, non-asset providers like NFI on the brokerage side are key in the routing guide because of their carrier partnerships. I think shippers in 2021 are going to be faced with unprecedented challenges in trying to predict what this market looks like for them, both with their demand and their sales and with capacity to actually move freight throughout their supply chain. What they need to be doing is partnering with strong 3PLs like NFI to ensure that they get a bird's eye view of what's happening in the broader marketplace and get an understanding and a scale that allows them to be successful. And also, what they're going to gain is collaboration and transparency. And I think what NFI brings to the table is precisely that and more. Supply chains are organic in nature right now, and I think that they're living organisms and they are moving. And a lot of that is demand, what that's driving in terms of change with how we position inventory and how we migrate inventory throughout the supply chain. Obviously, there's been an urbanization of forward nodes that allow traditional retailers and even e-commerce platforms to move freight into more urban centers in a way that gets them next day or same day service. And while that doesn't necessarily affect the major line haul components between major networks, especially transcontinental networks like West Coast and Northeast, we definitely are seeing a shift with not only the buying patterns and demand patterns, but the inventory levels and the inventory to sales ratios. So all of those things are conspiring to make 2021 a little more unpredictable. But I think that nimble supply chains exist, and obviously NFI with our scale and our visibility in this marketplace allow us to see those changes happening. I do think that with the shift that we've seen to e-commerce, there'll be a softening there as retail accelerates, although it's obvious that we may not see a return to what we had pre-COVID. It's reasonable to assume that there will be a nibbling effect on the demand that we see within e-commerce. And that could be good for rail capacity and frankly for truck capacity, as other providers who are maybe less fragmented across North America gain access to their customer base again, who are now finally back in business. But that remains to be seen. And I do think that for 2021, as supply chains evolve to meet the demands of consumers, being partnered with a 3PL like NFI gives them the best possible opportunity to be successful. Some drivers for change in 2021 that shippers need to be aware of is obviously with a new administration and more of an open door policy on trade, we could see increased transborder traffic, both northbound and southbound, between Canada and Mexico. But what we also might see is a shift, and this shift in the global space might have an impact on lead time and transit, because the West Coast port congestion is extreme, and that's led to freight moving through the Panama Canal to hit an eastern port. And this would be freight traditionally originating in Asia and landing in West Coast, whether that's up in the Port of Vancouver or in the Pacific Northwest or in LA Long Beach. And that migration eastward has a real big impact on how long it's going to take to get freight into their distribution centers. I think with more free trade, we might see even more volume as long as there's consumer stability. And what becomes difficult to predict is where that will come from. If you're operating a supply chain, you're buying from all over the world, your buying patterns may shift out of necessity to something more local, or it might be a different market than Asia, as an example. And when that happens, the predictability of transit time and the consolidation we're seeing in the ocean space may lead to delays. NFI Intermodal can help shippers by being the voice of the customer to the railroads. We have a lot of scale and a lot of recognition in this industry. We are members of professional bodies that oversee and govern how intermodal runs within North America. We are obviously very connected with our Class 1 railroad partners. And what we can do is strongly advocate for shippers, not only in 2021, but 2021 and beyond, because of our, number one, our presence, our scale, and the fact that we run an asset and a non-asset network allows us to have more flexibility, more stability, and more capacity for our customer base. I find rail exciting, and I know that it's been volatile and it's been a tough year, but we also know that it can only go up from here. So I'm excited to see how we respond to the challenges of 2020 and build a better, stronger network in 2021.